Welcome, folks. Let's dive into this idea that's as seductive as it is dangerous. The notion that the end justifies the means.
Yeah, right. It's that idea where you might say doing something morally questionable is okay if the outcome is positive, isn't it?
Exactly. It's like if you have a really good result, it seems to, well, excuse even the nastiest steps. But as we dig into it, the truth gets murkier, almost like the bad consequences eventually overtake any supposed benefits.
Yeah, I totally get that. When you really think about it, the idea seems to tempt folks into just justifying anything they do.
Absolutely. And historically, this philosophy has been invoked to rationalize some pretty awful deeds. Think about it. The Inquisition, brutal torture in the name of saving souls, or say, those communist revolutions that led to mass deaths, all in the pursuit of equality.
Right. And don't forget how governments have manipulated truths, like the U.S. government's actions during the Vietnam War and later Iraq. Those actions were defended by claiming they were all aimed at a higher purpose, correct?
Yes, exactly. It's dangerous because it turns clear ethical boundaries into blurry lines. Every time someone convinces themselves that bending the rules is okay because of a noble goal, it opens the door to further misdeeds.
Yeah. But isn't it tempting sometimes? Like, in a crisis situation, the logic of sacrificing a bit of morality to save lives can feel, well, pragmatic.
Sure, it can feel pragmatic on the surface, and people might claim it's efficient. But then you ask, at what cost? When the means become as unethical as the ends, you slowly erode the very foundation of what we call justice.
Right, because once you start compromising core principles, it's like a slippery slope, isn't it? Even small deviations can lead to enormous systemic damage in society.
Precisely. And think about this. Once you allow unethical behavior, just this one time, soon you're in a cycle where it's easier to do it again and then harder to say no to someone else doing it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then where do we draw the line? If someone says, I'm bending the rules just to save lives, how do we decide what's acceptable?
That's really the heart of the matter. The answer lies in understanding that the means matter just as much as the end. Well, let me give you an analogy. It's like baking a cake. Sure, if you use the best ingredients, the final cake will taste amazing. But if you cheat by using something harmful or low quality, then in the end, the integrity of the cake is ruined.
Yep, nice analogy. So as a society, we risk erasing the differences between right and wrong if we let unethical behavior slide, even momentarily.
Exactly. And even political arenas get corrupted by such reasoning. When one side cheats, it gives the green light to the other side to do the same, turning politics into a game of manipulation rather than one of genuine progress.
Indeed. And that's where institutions suffer, right? Trust in things like laws and government erodes, and truth becomes almost optional.
Right on point. Once you start enabling deceit or cruelty for the sake of an end, even a seemingly noble one, you're inviting a breakdown of ethical standards. It's like building a house on a shaky foundation that's bound to collapse.
Yeah. It seems then that the core message is you have to let your methods reflect your morals, because who you are is defined by the way you achieve your goals.
Exactly, which brings us to the philosophical opposition to the idea. Think of Immanuel Kant's philosophy, for instance. He argued that you should never treat people merely as a means to an end, but always as ends in themselves.
Right. That's a strong stance. And it resonates even today, like what Martin Luther King Jr. said in a powerful way, you cannot do wrong in order to do right. Isn't that it?
Yes, absolutely. MLK emphasized that the road to justice must itself be just. When you compromise on the means, using deceit, violence, or manipulation, you risk becoming the very injustice you are fighting against.
But I gotta ask here, can there ever be a scenario where the end might truly justify the means, especially in extreme situations?
That's a fair challenge. Look, there might be moments in history where some argue that bending rules was the only option. But even in those cases, The aftermath often reveals a legacy of suffering, distrust, and corruption that overshadows any positive outcome.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So even if the end seems overwhelmingly good, the cost to our ethical fabric might not be worth it. It's like borrowing from tomorrow to pay for today's happiness.
Exactly. And that borrowing can bankrupt our moral future. Once society accepts that manipulation and deceit are acceptable shortcuts, the slippery slope starts to take shape more rapidly than anticipated.
That really resonates. And then we have those more nuanced questions like, would you accept rigging an election if it were to stop a dangerous leader? Or allow censorship on hate speech if it risks silencing dissent later?
Yes, those are the kind of questions that expose the real issue. Every time we compromise our ethical standards, we set a precedent for justifying another compromise next time.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like once the door is open to unethical shortcuts, you can't really close it again. And every subsequent action further blurs the lines between right and wrong.
Absolutely. And then eventually you lose the very values you set out to protect. The means, the journey become as tainted as any negative consequence we feared to see.
Exactly. Now, if we look at all this, what's the alternative then? How do we pursue our goals ethically without compromising our integrity?
The alternative is to hold the line. It's crucial to align our actions with our values, no matter how inconvenient it might seem. It means demanding honesty, refusing to dehumanize others, and not letting expediency override ethical considerations.
Yes, that's the point. That definitely sounds like a more sustainable approach, but isn't it sometimes easier to justify a few small bends for what we think is a greater good?
It might seem easier, but once you let your standards drop even slightly, it becomes a challenge to pull them back up. Every compromise chips away at the moral authority we rely on to build a just society.
I totally get that. So, as we're discussing this, could it be that the seductive aspect of the philosophy is its simplicity? It says, do what works, without the messy details of ethics dragging you down.
Yes, that's the seduction. It oversimplifies a complex, nuanced reality. By stripping away ethical responsibility, it gives a false sense of efficiency and control. But then, as history shows us, that's when the worst actions come to light.
Exactly. It's kind of like balancing on a knife's edge. One misstep leads to a cascade of ethical failures that, in the end, undermine the very cause you thought you were supporting.
Right, and the irony is when you let the means slide, you ultimately become compromised yourself. The process transforms you, turning noble pursuits into something corrosive and fundamentally unjust.
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, while the end justifies the means might seem like a shortcut to desirable outcomes, it ends up damaging the moral structure required for a healthy society.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important. Even if it's a tough pill to swallow to insist on staying true to our ethical standards. The journey matters just as much as the destination.
For sure. And that's our take on this dangerous philosophy. Let's keep asking these tough questions and challenge ourselves to ensure that our means never compromise the ends we cherish the most.